but when you catch glimpses of it, it is transforming. So I would tell people, if you were in my counseling office and you were sharing the thing you've never shared, or you let God and others see you fully, he still has an experience where he loves you fully, even in light, even despite that thing or that place in your life that you have shame.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rooted, where we're rooted in truth, growing in freedom, and prospering in life.
We are your hosts, Josie and Simone, and today we are honored to host Josh Loy. He's a licensed mental health counselor and founder of New Ground Counseling. He and his team have guided more than 2,000 clients through challenges ranging from anxiety and addiction to marital strife and trauma. He is also a pastor of Reach Church in the Seattle area. Then beyond his professional roles, Josh is a dedicated husband, father of 4, and an advocate for integrating faith into everyday life. So we are so excited to have you, Josh, on this podcast. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I may have drank a little too much coffee. I feel a little frazzled coming in. I'm not sure if we can get the Zen version of the mental health counselor today, but maybe we'll cover a lot of content because of that. Maybe I'll just be speaking really quickly and we'll just talk about everything under the sun here in an hour.
Perfect. We're so ready for it. The first question I'd love to ask you, Josh, is just bring us back to your roots and where you came from, how you grew up, what that looked like.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up ministry family, moving quite a bit. It's funny because I actually grew up probably nearby where you both grew up in Worthington, Minnesota, and eventually made my way over to Nebraska. But yeah, grew up ministry family, lots of kids. There's 4 of us. I know that you guys are very familiar with camp ministry. I feel like I grew up at camps. I grew up at, my dad's a youth pastor, so I was on all the trips, all the ski trips, all the summer, winter, spring retreats that the youth group would take. I was there, and having fun and living a good life because of that. So yeah, most of my roots are kind of around that area.
So what kind of led you to go into the counseling route? Do you think that your dad's history of being a pastor kind of led into that, or what kind of drew you to that career field?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I feel like I don't know, maybe there's still times I'm like, why did I do this? What am I doing here? I chose this. I say that only, I think it's a little ironic because I happen to, in life, be pretty conflict avoidant. Like if there's something hard, I kind of marvel at the lengths that I will go to avoid the hard thing. And then here I am, and now I'm a therapist, and I just sit with the hardest stuff all the time and help people hold it. But I've always been really high compassion, maybe a little too much, I remember like even in middle school, like finding, someone that struggled and like getting so wrapped up in their issue and their difficulty that it was affecting me even at night. So I think I've always just been like just high empath, maybe too much so. That's actually a real ditch for people in this field. How do you set down all these things you're picking up? But I think I also have parents who really care about people. My dad's kind of person addict, it drives my mom crazy. Well, he'll meet anyone and everyone in his atmosphere. Like we'll go out to eat and he can't stop talking to the waitress. We'll be at Disneyland and he'll find, like he would find people that know you too. And my mom's like, come on, let's go, Greg. So I feel like my parents just grew up loving people, kind of always in the people sphere. And then eventually I just found in a lot of these spaces, once I finally made my way, even before I got into ministry, I was in these spaces working with really hard populations. The first job that I got in Washington State, I was working with teenage sex offenders who'd been taken out of their own homes. So I was plunged into this sphere of really what would be considered like lepers of society, people who I would say get the least amount of compassion from others for the struggle that they have. But I was really drawn to that, and I could love anyone and everyone, and that felt like a real bane, to be honest, when I was in ministry, because I didn't want to be on the stage. And I'd get these roles and they'd shove me up on stage. And I studied youth ministry in college, which means you like minored in stupid games, but I hated that. Like I couldn't entertain anyone. I couldn't be compelling on the stage, and I didn't want the spotlight. But in those settings, I'm always drawn to the one person. And I'm actually usually drawn to the person who's like not allowed, the person who's not a part, the person who looks alone, the person who is maybe on the margins. So I always just wanted to be in that one-on-one context. So it was a big experiment too. I'll just be honest. Like when I started studying, it was like, this costs a lot of money. Grad school costs a ton of money. This better work. This better pay off. This better actually be what I want to do. And thankfully, when I started studying, it was like, oh, this is right. This fits me. And I think that the last answer is, I was consumed myself with this question of how do people change? I ended up in all these settings where you're trying to help people, trying to help them know Jesus, know the Lord. And I was consumed with this idea, how do people actually transform? And I wanted that question for others because I was the minister, or I was the youth pastor, or I was the small group leader. I wanted to know that for them, but I also wanted to know it for me. I had this real question of, okay, Jesus, can you change me deeply? And what will it take to have me change deeply? And then there's more of my story that I think it took me really struggling really hard and then entering a counseling context to learn, oh, this is what it takes to transform. And when I sat just as a client across from a person who heard my hardest things, my worst things, and was like, loving me in the midst of it, that was really transforming. So have you guys done counseling? Have you done counseling before?
I have not done counseling. There is free counseling at Bethel, though, and I've always been intrigued. And because of my busy schedule, I've just never made it happen. But that is my goal for senior year.
So I actually took advantage of that free counseling that Simone mentioned my last year at Bethel, and I loved it. And I had never, I don't know, I just, like Simone, I was always so busy, so I didn't do it my first couple of years of Bethel. But then a couple of my roommates did it, and they really enjoyed it. And I was always so curious. I was like, I wonder what it's like. And I think it depends which counselor you end up with. But the lady that I met with, she was great. And there's something about, I'm very much a verbal processor. And so there's something about just having someone to talk to and having someone to just kind of bounce ideas off of that's not in your sphere of influence. Because I feel like my family has always kind of been like my built-in counseling. I love talking with my sister and my parents, and they are with me through the hardest times and the best times. But there's something about talking to someone who, whatever you end up deciding about something, it won't affect them whatsoever. Like nothing that you decide will affect their life really, unless you become president or something. And so there's something about just like talking to someone that's removed from a situation, doesn't have any biases whatsoever. So I've really found a lot of value in it. Obviously, I'm not at Bethel anymore, so I haven't been going through counseling, but it was something I really appreciated during that season especially when it was free, it was really helpful.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's funny because some of it's like kind of normal. Like you probably sat in there and were like, oh, this is what it's like just to be received by someone who listens really well, reflects back to me really well. In some ways, it seems maybe even basic. Like maybe your parents have been doing that with you your whole life. And in other ways, it's really unique. Including the safety you just named. It's like, oh, that's supposed to be the best thing about counseling, right? It's the safest place in the world. And there's something really unique about that, Even when I was a pastor and then I started doing counseling, I was like, oh, this is interesting. This is even safer than the church, maybe, because even as a pastor, where can I find a space that I can just be, in my own skin, with my own struggles, say anything, say my real thoughts, and have another person have no, as you said, no strings attached. So I love that you got to have that experience. Yeah. And, some people dread it. So I think when people think about counseling, they probably think, exactly what you said, like, what is that space? What is it? And I think a lot of people probably think other things like, I'm not crazy, I'm not going to counseling, or no, that's just for people who struggle the worst, or other negative things.
What do you think are some of the misconceptions about counseling that people often associate with the idea of counseling, and what do you think are the arguments for it?
Counseling is such a broad field that you are right that every counseling office is a little bit different, but I think the stigma is fading. I think there was like a real stigma about like this is for crazy people. I still think men really struggle to get into counseling. Like if you look at statistically across the field, who seeks out counseling? It's like women ages 25 to 45. And so I do think that there's something about vulnerability and emotional or personal reflection that men are still maybe a little bit averse to. And that could be a stereotype, or that could be because Men just they tend to maybe sometimes be less aware of what they're experiencing emotionally, if they're even allowed to have emotions. Yeah, but I think I asked that question genuinely. I'm like, oh, what is your guys' experience of this? Because I've heard kind of everything. And for me, I just see a ton of overlap with even what the scriptures say about just what you're supposed to do together as people. I'm supposed to love people with the love of Christ. You're speaking the truth in love. You're bearing burdens with one another. You're grieving loss, all these things that like all each others that like we're commanded to do. I really see counseling as that. Like it's just doing that. I do think it's doing it in the safest possible context. And often the person is really trained like well to, high compassion, but also able to look, I think we're kind of all bad listeners, like relationally every day, I'm actually marvel at this because I think my wife experiences a lot of bad listening from me. And there must be this question that's like, you do this professionally. Why are you so bad at this? But she is a better listener than me. I'll be telling her, I'll come home and she'll ask me about my day. And she'll be like, oh, so you felt this when this happened. And I'm just like watching kind of like out of body. I'm not as good at this as you are. So I think we all have natural counselors in our lives that this happens. But it's wonderful when someone is good at it, when someone is focused on has high relational skills. And then of course, when it's complex, when what you're struggling is complex, whether it's like trauma, right? There's so much that happens in some of these more complex struggles that's happening to us automatically. When someone has a map to help you walk that path of healing, which is often the unknown for us. Not only is it scary for us or it's painful or the thing we're talking about is the thing it's hard for us to speak about. When someone actually knows what they're doing and where they're going, it's like just this crazy, beautiful space that can help. So there's a lot to it, a lot to the field of counseling.
Mm-hmm. Something that is unique about you as a counselor, which I love, is that you bring faith into it. And I know not all counseling services do this. Talk to us. Why are you so passionate about bringing faith into counseling?
I really value the field of counseling. I want to say that first. Like even as a Christian, I have learned so much from just being a part of the field and sitting with people who maybe are not, they don't have the faith commitments I have, but I've sat with people who don't have the faith commitments I have, who are so committed to their clients, who hold so much human dignity for the person across from them, that it's absolutely shocked me and challenged me and shown me, wow, I didn't know you could love someone this deeply. You could be so for someone. You could create this much kindness for the person across from you. So I think I have learned a lot from the field, even that the parts that are not Christian, including that, the counseling's like this place in society that really does reject judgment. It's like no judgment for anyone that comes. Like they were talking, I was kind of marveling at this because I came out of these spiritual contexts and came into these own counseling groups at one point in my life where I was in a counseling group and realized, oh, they're afraid to talk about anything. Like all the things that I have shame for, or that I'm like, oh man, maybe I even have spiritual shame for it. I'm like, oh God must hate this part of me, or I feel so bad about my badness here. They didn't have that. But because of that, there's all this freedom in lack of judgment to speak about, sexuality or just any struggle you're having, or even your inner thoughts. Yeah, well, I thought this just now when you said that. So the safety of the space just shocked me. And I do think experiencing it outside really longed for me to be able to bring it into the church, because I think God sees our whole person. God sees people to the bottom and still has delight for them, still has human dignity for them. And so when I think of being in a counseling room with a person, God really has more delight and wonder and curiosity and care for them than I ever could. So I'm just trying to put on his eyes, his lens, his glasses for those people. And I think that does change how I see people. Because I think grace should allow that, the story of the gospel and grace should really give us the deepest love for people. And that's how Jesus constantly describes. You see the way he encounters people. And it's like, oh, that's not how I encounter people. I'm really judgmental. I don't like, when people are mean to me or do something that makes them my enemy. And he just is constantly crowning people with human dignity. So I do think he's a wonderful model for anyone who's being a therapist, to wonder, how could I do this? And then, like I said, I started meeting with lepers. I started sitting with people in the midst of really hard struggles. And then it was really helpful to know Jesus and go, what does he think of these people? How would he sit with these people? And so I do think he's kind of the fuel for me and even the model, and that's really helpful.
I love how you're just emphasizing the fact that, hey, asking that question, okay, God, how do you see this person and how can I treat them accordingly? And I love in my Bible study recently, we've been talking about how the beauty that Jesus was fully human. And it's easy to think, oh yeah, he was perfect. But remembering that he is fully human and he fully had feelings and emotions just like us. And so he knows how we might feel when we're interacting with difficult people, but understanding that, you know, the same spirit that raised Jesus from the dead lives inside of us. And so we have a direct lifeline to Jesus, to God, to say, hey, God, how would you respond to this? Because his spirit is literally living inside of us. And so I just think that's such a great reminder of, hey, not only can we ask that question, but we can get an answer from him of how we should respond to people.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I think even the way he shows up too, like in his humanity, is it has so much depth to it. Like he has so much emotion. I saw someone this last week who told me him and a group of men are doing a Bible study. The Bible study is about how Jesus shows up emotionally. Like it's a Bible study about the emotions of Jesus and where they show up in these different situations. And so yeah, he is fully human. And even the way he shows up shows like so much depth towards us, towards humanity. And so I feel like he really does like teach us so much about the human soul, about what it means to be human, and like you're saying, Josie, just how to sit with others.
Yeah. Josh, what would you say are some of the biggest issues that you see come into your office and issues that you have to deal with currently in today's society?
Yeah, you know, they're so varied, but yeah, some of the biggest ones. I think anxiety is up in a big way. If you look at statistically what's happening, even with Gen Z, it's like ever since, and this was true of COVID, but it's just true of this generation now, maybe more than previous. It's funny because it's statistically it shows that it's more prevalent, but maybe we just have the words to describe what it is now, and maybe it's more socially acceptable to say I have anxiety. But I think a lot of people walk through this life with some sense of like hyperarousal, which is I have uncomfortable emotions and then I start to feel them bodily. So I think a lot of people struggle with a feeling of being frazzled or being hyped up or having their fears coming out unconsciously in ways that are really unpleasant. Like I feel really uncomfortable in life. So I see that. I mean, depression's of course really huge. I think the one that I don't see that I know is out there that I wish I saw more of, because I just know, is sexual struggles. Sexual struggles are like so huge. It was interesting. I have a buddy that now leads a really big ministry down in College Station, Texas, and they have a Bible study there of like 17,000 people. But every time he does a Q&A on his Instagram, I'm not surprised that the same question seems to surface, which is like, I'm struggling sexually. I'm dealing with deep shame about it. What do I do? And then, Barna released this study just this last year called The Porn Phenomenon. It's statistics that have been so consistent, but it's the most startling we've seen, which is something like over 60% of men seek out porn monthly. And then of that group, over 75% say they would never tell anyone and they have no one to help them. And then even among females, it was something around 30% seek out porn monthly. And so anyway, so I just think that there's these massive sexual struggles. Like when I'm at church and I'm looking out at the congregation, I literally just spoke on this, which is, there's a lot of trepidation when you're like, I'm going to come speak on lust and on porn. But as a counselor, I think I've sat with tons of people who are daring to share, I do have this sexual struggle, or I don't know how to understand this part of me. And I know for anyone that I sit with, there's a reason it's there. There's a reason it's a part of their story. It's all behavior is storied. And so I do groups and I sit with people in counseling where we're just trying to tease out, well, let's talk about how you became a sexual person and what messaging you received. And the other thing that came out of that study was the average exposure to pornography is, it's age 8.6 at this point. So under age 9 is the average that somebody is exposed to pornography. And then there was another stat in it that said over half of people ages 15 to 25 come across what they consider to be porn every month without trying to. And so I'm not surprised that this is happening, and I long for the healing for people in these spaces. And I try to create spaces where people can talk openly about this thing that usually has been a part of their life for a long time. And so that's an area that I see and I'm drawn to talk with people about, but it is filled with it's filled with shame. It's filled with, It's this area of struggle that so many Christians are walking through. They've never told anyone, and the reason is I think this is true of all struggles. I think this is true of anyone who enters my office, whether they have a relational problem, a marriage problem, a sexuality problem, that shame is somewhere there saying, you're uniquely broken and you are not good enough. And I'm pretty convinced at this point that the work of counseling is pushing against shame. So that's what I'm trying to do with people.
So how, from your perspective, because I know that, healing and recovering from shame is a big part of what you do. How do you practically help people to overcome shame associated with any sort of sin or any sort of temptation?
I think some of the badness that people feel will always enter the room with this subject. And the question is, can you hold it well with someone? Can you invite and create a space that's so safe that they could speak something as absolutely terrifying as, here is a story of sexuality, of my sexual struggle, or here's a story that, here's a behavior. And it's true, to be honest, I sat with people for a year. They've been a client for a year. They came in to do let's talk about depression or anxiety, or their work. And after a year, we're finally able to say, okay, can I tell you why I really came to counseling? And that's how deep the shame actually goes for some people. And so yeah, I think it's making it safe, but I think too, people, I think there's so much here. I don't think people have been allowed to be sexual persons. I think there's been a lot of silence, even spiritually, from the church on this subject, or a lot of shoulding, just the things you shouldn't do. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Or the only passages we speak about sexuality or about sexual development or who you are, we don't tell people you are a sexual person and that's good and your sexuality has goodness and beauty. We just speak passages like cut off your hand if it causes you to sin. And so I think some of the ways it's been conveyed spiritually is with a lot of emotional don't do it that I think has made people wonder, can I speak that? Could I ever say it in a church? Could I let people know this part of me? Could I let God actually into the conversation about who I am?
I think it definitely is a huge struggle and has continued to increase with the internet and everything, which is really sad that it is hard to talk about and it's hard for the church to bring it up too. And a verse that I have been taught through different things, whether it's a temptation like this or a different temptation, alcoholism or something else, there's a verse that says, by his stripes you are healed. Jesus' death on the cross has healed you. And I think it's so easy for us to try to do things on our own. Okay, I need to do this. Oh, shoot, I messed up again. I need to do this again. And it's all up to us rather than fixing our eyes on Jesus, who has already covered our sins and already made us clean. And he's saying, you are a child of mine. This is who I say you are. Live in that and live that out and don't live in the shame. And sometimes shifting that perspective, I know it's not always that easy, but shifting your perspective and looking at Jesus and seeing this is what he's already done for me, this isn't what I have to do, then that kind of gives you this new identity to live off of.
Yeah, I love that. I think that is that's such a hard part of the work, is you're trying to actually confront and find the identity of shame that people have consumed. A lot of people really do believe in their badness around this subject, or they think they're the only one. I think that's part of the shame too, is that you look at those stats and you're like, wow, everyone I sit with thinks that they're the only one. And so they really think that there's something uniquely wrong with them, but making it, what you were saying there, Simone, of he's done it. He has really died for you. He has eyes of delight for you. I feel like that's half of my work with men, because I mostly, of course, work with men on this issue, is even convincing them that he still has delight for you, that you're not counted out because of this struggle. And I think another part of it is there's a lot of exploration that's just never been done. When you can't talk about something, you can't be curious about something. When you're terrified about something, you can't be curious about it. But a lot of the groups and space I create and resources I use really go back to, let's just talk about how this came to be a part of your life. And what did your home say? Did your home even talk about sex? Did your home talk about your body? Did you grow up having any education about sexuality? What was that education? Or even I love this question, which is, if you were to say out loud, what were the values or the attitudes that your home taught you about sex? What were they? And what comes out of that is crazy to me. It's all kinds of stuff. People being oh, we never spoke a single word in my home about it. Or, oh, I just heard it was good but dangerous. So we didn't talk about it, but it was for marriage, and so it was this great thing. But stay away, stay away, stay away. Or it was seen as, or maybe, I haven't heard a whole lot of homes that actually have talked about it freely, but there's so many messages that people tend to get, but they've not gotten to explore that. They've not gotten to connect the dots of, oh, this is why I feel this way, or this is why this is so hard to talk about, or this is the longing that I'm trying to meet in this place.
I love how you just emphasize the importance of bringing things into the light. And that's because 1 John 1:5, it says that God is light, in him there is no darkness at all. I just think that's such a beautiful picture. And I love how you also mentioned that people can change and that there is hope that people can change. And you mentioned that you saw change in your life. And I'd love to hear kind of what that change was that you saw in your life and just how transformation can happen.
Yeah, well, I hope it's still happening. I'm in therapy right now and trying to pursue the same thing, trying to be really curious about who am I, what am I carrying into my life every day. I love that you're talking about bringing things into the light. When you bring things into the light, it better be in a safe place, because a lot of people and a lot of contexts ask for people to live in the light, but respond in a way that will tell them to hide. Mm-hmm. And so, unfortunately for me, I've been a part of one of those contexts. I was at Marsell Church, which was a huge phenomenon out here. It's the reason I'm in Seattle. It's because I came out as an intern, bright young intern. We were so young, me and my wife, we'd been married for just a few years. And we came out here to be a part of this church. And we just had brought a lot of the clunkiness and baggage of our stories into our early marriage. And so when we moved out here, we just had, our struggles were like starting to just be on display. When I look back at that time, we got married really early. So I was married at age 20, and thought it was just going to be cake. It was like, oh, it's just so fun, had the gleam in our eyes. But when we came out here, there were a lot of things left over from our dating relationship, and being a part of that church started to display the places that we were really struggling in our marriage and privately. And for me, there came a time, we were watching people in this church. There's a lot of beautiful things about Marsell Church. So we were really drawn in and really young. We worked free internships. We became a part of the ministries here, and there's a lot of beautiful things. We were really drawn in. And the longer we were a part of it, the more we can look back now and go, oh my goodness, what was happening in this area or with this thing were super unhealthy. So I had private struggles for some time around sexuality that I really longed for change in. But one thing about Marsell is the context and the counseling groups, the places that these things would get shared. They'd ask for vulnerability, and if you shared, their model was kind of to beat it out of you, to make you feel bad enough that you wouldn't do it again. And they did that with Bible verses. They did that with theology. And so there were moments here, first intern and then on staff, when I would come to a superior and I would risk a lot. Because if I were to look back at my life, I'll just be honest, I had deep shame. I didn't know I had deep shame, but I really believed that if people knew the real me, there's no way I would be married. There's no way my wife would have chose me. There's no way I would be on staff here. If they knew me, surely they would reject me. That was kind of this hidden thing under the surface. And then there were moments where I dared to let people see my real struggles. And so one of those moments, I came to a staff person at Reach who was my superior and said, hey, this is my struggle. I really am longing to change what's available to me. And that conversation was short. And basically this person said, I also have had this struggle, and that you're right to bring it to me. And if we have to have this conversation again, there's going to be a problem. And that was the end of the conversation, which was a way of saying, don't tell me this again and stop it. And that was often the model for change there, was just stop it. And so it also was an environment that demanded a lot. So life became stressful. We went through some really hard things. We miscarried a child. My wife entered depression for the first time in her life. And we were pregnant with another child, and blood was pooling around the baby, and we were so afraid we were going to miscarry again. I mean, truly, as a husband, I was like, I can't pull my wife out of depression. I can't help us. I'm devastated myself from what happened. And here we go again. One Sunday, went forward for healing. Our church was practicing anointing oil and healing, which they never did, but they were doing it that Sunday. And we went forward because we were just desperate. Like, we need this. We need to be healed. We cannot miscarry another child. And in the midst of that, elders pulled us forward, brought us into a room, and encouraged us not just to receive the prayer of healing, but to share. They asked, is there anything you've never shared with one another? And me and my wife both shared things we had never shared with each other. Because so much of our marriage, we realized it later after we went through counseling and counseling groups together, as, wow, we were wearing masks with each other. We were so afraid of each other, to know one another's struggles. But what happened next was even worse, because what happened next was almost like an inquisition. We brought these things to the elders and said, we want to be healed of these things. And we were essentially fired. We were exiled. We were brought into a room where it was almost like an FBI investigation, and so the way that we were treated was really, really poor. But what happened then, and that was really painful, but we went to our own process. We sought out counseling ourselves. We sought out healing in the field of mental health. And that's what drew me into counseling, was being in these settings where I was finally invited to show up fully. And then I was not met with the hammer and you're the worst and get out of here. And instead there was room to be curious and explore. There was even more maps and understanding. Do you realize what this is? Do you realize that this is why? Can we talk about your past? Can we talk about your childhood? And for me, like, uncovering the layers of shame and the why. The why is this happening? Why is this part of my life? Led to so much freedom, led to so much healing, and the kindness that I received from others. So I think for me, even now, I preached on lust last month. And I know the way that I preached and the invitation I gave, it's going to draw out people to say what I hear all the time. I've never told anybody this. Whether it's a story, whether it's I was assaulted, whether it's I'm addicted to pornography, whatever it is, I know people are going to be ready to say it. But even I emphasize then, if you're going to tell someone, I encourage you to find a safe space. And that can be therapy, and that can be a friend that is safe, or that can be, if you have a small group at church, that's great. But there are a lot of spaces that ask for vulnerability spiritually, and then they're not safe. They give people an experience that tells them they're even worse than you are bad, you are the worst. And that leads people into shame, away from the light. So I think I'm really passionate about creating the right spaces, that can hold those kind of heavy things that people do carry and eventually might chance to tell someone.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate that. How would you say over time, as you've started getting away from shame and that mindset and kind of what you had been taught by different people and elders, what ultimately got you to the place that you are now, and what continues to help you grow?
Yeah. Well, I think when I sat with someone, I really believe being the person of Jesus to others. I sat with a counselor who has since passed away in a tragic car accident, but this person was a female. This person was a female who worked in the area of sexuality, which was terrifying for me. But that person was so kind. Even when I'd show them this much, this happens if I creak open the door to show you this much, which is how I did it. I was like, I'm definitely not telling you my story, right? At that point, I was so guarded, I'd felt so beat down. I'm definitely not going to be open with you. But every time I creaked the door open a little bit more, there was just kindness. And there was, will you say more? And then there was even understanding. So I think, I'll give you an example, because I think it's even playing out in the groups that I lead now. I lead groups in my church, walking through these resources, and there was a guy going through He, really difficult situation where he had an affair. He had an affair recently, and was trying to walk that out with his wife, and his wife was in the betrayal groups that we run, and we're walking through this resource that's trying to even unlock for these men, what is the thing that you're longing for in life, that you're chasing over here? You're chasing, whether it's pornography or an affair, whatever it is, it's telling you something about your heart and your longing. What is that thing, And for me, I think understanding the layers of shame that I had, but for this guy, even understanding, I don't want to share too much. I don't want to share much of his story because of the confidentiality of the space. But also, he himself had been assaulted when he was a kid, by a babysitter, and the woman that he had an affair with just happened to look just like his babysitter, and he lived his whole life with the trauma of having been sexually assaulted himself repeatedly by this person. And a lot of times people can't understand why they do the things they do. Like, so much of counseling is just trying to help people understand, why do I do the things that I do? Helping us know ourselves. And for him, even that process gave back to him the understanding, I was trying to control, I was trying to have an experience of this thing but not be controlled by it. I was trying to do the thing but not have the trauma attached to it. And so for him, just connecting, why do I do this, was huge. And that was big for me to figure out why I did this. But then I think it is just transforming to have other people who look at you and go, I don't reject you. I don't have condemnation for you. I'm still here. I'll see you next time. I think to have the relational experience of people loving you is really different than having some head knowledge about God. I think you need both. There's so many people that go to church on Sundays and they hear God is love, God is love, God is love, but their story of their lives and what they've received from parents or others tell a really different story, right? You can tell them they're wonderful. You can tell them that God loves them because He has the light for them and cares about them. But what they've experienced themselves, their whole lives, has been a different story. And to be honest, it's an altogether more convincing story because it's in their body, it's in their memories. They know what it feels like. And so people need relational experiences that show God's love to them. So when I'm in counseling and I sit with someone, like the first night I was in a group counseling, and I was the last one to share, because I was terrified. I'd never actually let people see who I am. And so I was the last one to share, and they were really gentle with me. And at the end of the night, at the end of everybody going around the circle, the facilitator said, Josh, where are you at? And at that point in my life, I shared, I am so lost. Every person that I wanted to think I was great, every guy that I feared what he thought of me and wanted to respect me, now knows my most shameful things. I think we're going to miscarry this child. When I was fired, we went into a period of unemployment where we dug this hole of debt. So I was like, I have a hole of debt that I don't think I can dig out of. I'm looking across the way at my wife right now, like, can any of this be healed? So I said, I feel like I'm at the bottom of this valley and I don't know how to get out. And the guy next to me puts his hand on my shoulder and says, hey, we are with you. Which is so simple, but to say, he said, we love you and we're with you no matter what happens next. Yeah. That was like a prolific moment in my story, to have somebody relationally here. And that was the beginning, right? I showed him like that much, like just break the door open a little. But as I walked through that group and I showed them even more, that was their experience of me. And that's what they showed me every week is, we are for you. We don't reject you. And that taught me about God's love. That actually helped me accept the gospel. That helped me accept that He does, getting to experience it from another person. So I do think that experience has driven me in counseling with these other people, just trying to show up as Jesus across from them. And if they can experience that, I know what that does to the brain. Takes an idea and makes it real. And so I think that's part of the healing I've received and other people need.
Yeah. I love that. Beautiful. And I just love the emphasis on being there for people and listening, because, people don't care about what they care about how you make them feel, and that's what they remember. And in that moment, it sounds like they made you feel seen and loved. And I just love, in Revelations, it says that they triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And I think it's easy for us to see someone's testimony as your all-encompassing story of when you found Jesus. But I think some of those little micro moments are also testimonies, and just how your life is a testimony, and just those little actions of, hey, I'm here with you. That's a testimony in and of itself and points back to Jesus. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. I'm sure you guys have that too, right? Like the friend that's like so safe, you can just say anything with. It's the people you actually let see you all the way, right?
Yeah.
There's something that even gives you permission to be yourself, to ask more, like, wow, what is going on here inside of me? I feel like there are few people in our lives that we can often do that with and know, I'm going to get love back. I'm going to get safety back. But I think a lot of us have like one or two people, and those people are, I think, Jesus in our lives, are embodying Jesus, are being incarnations of Jesus to us. And I think that is his love. That is part of the change that we get to experience. And it allows us to be imperfect. I'm constantly asking. It's allowed me to, even in my life now, not go, I'm done. I met Jesus. Now it's over. It's like, oh, now I've learned the freedom of actually getting to change and getting to be imperfect and getting to just show up with people. And because of that, he's constantly showing me new places to change and to transform.
And I think it's a huge encouragement too, when we can reflect and notice, oh, those were those people in my life who sat down and listened to me and who cared for me. And that just makes me even more want to be that person to them. I want to be the person that people can sit and talk for hours and I can just listen and grab their shoulder and say, hey, I see you. So I think, the more that we do that to people, the more they do it back to us. And then it's just a circle of encouragement. So
yeah, and those people often show me how bad of a listener I am. You've heard that like definition of bad listening, where it's like you're just waiting for the person to stop talking, so So I wonder if even this experience has made you guys better listeners. Like even this process of what we're doing right now, where you are so curious. You've asked me like 15 questions since we got on here.
I definitely would say that this process has made us become better listeners for sure. Because also it's not, we want to make it about you. We want to make it about our guests and not about all of our questions. But at the same time, like we need to hear what you're saying so that we know what question to ask next. But I think it's so easy with you too, just being a counselor, and you can talk easily. This conversation I feel like has been so easy too. So I would say it is important to be listening, but it also comes super easy when we have someone easy to talk to. So thanks for that.
Yeah, would you guys consider yourselves journalists? This feels like journalism in a sense. Like you really are uncovering stories and pursuing them at a deep level.
I love that. I love that a lot. Yeah. I think I'd consider us journalists. What about you, Jos?
I guess I never thought of that language. I would say I would consider us storytellers.
Okay.
But journalist makes more sense because, we're asking the questions, but I think, there's something fascinating about people's stories, and just like you said, experiences have more weight to them than just head knowledge. And I know that when I think about the times when I felt God's presence the closest, it's through stories in my life and hearing other people's stories. And so I think there's just something that's exciting about uncovering someone's story. So I think journalism, that could work.
It's kind of fun because outside of the podcast, Josie and I both do journalistic kind of careers in a way. So I'm in college still, but I have an internship at a news outlet. So I've been doing some journalism stuff. And then Josie, she's currently the press secretary in South Dakota. So she's doing some journalist stuff. But so that's kind of funny how that worked out.
That is kind of interesting.
Yeah. But I definitely would.
I've heard that idiom before, that like journalists have become the best listeners because their whole thing is like, they ask the second question and the third question, and they're trying to get to the heart of what's there. And so I do watch interviewers at times like yourselves, and I'm like, they'd be good in a counseling office.
Yeah, that might be true. That might. But I would definitely say that this journalism, to me at least, makes more of an impact just because it is your real story. We get as much of the meat as we can out of it, I guess, in 45 minutes, but it's great to just be able to talk about Jesus. And ultimately for me, and I know Josie would agree too, like that's the purpose of our lives. And so the more that we can tell people about Jesus and spread the truth is what ultimately gives us life, and it gives everyone else life too in the end. So
it's beautiful.
The true journalism is here on this podcast.
I love that. I wonder too, because I've looked at your list of guests, and you've spoken with so many different types of people, different careers, different life stages. I imagine there's like quite a gleaning that comes from getting to encounter stories from so many people across so many industries, across just so many paths.
I would
Do you feel like you're getting smarter?
agree
Do you feel
100%.
learning a lot?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like we've just learned so much. And honestly, it's funny, but Simone and I say this a lot. We kind of forget that people listen to this because honestly, we sit down and we have such a great conversation. And I learned, like today, I just learned so much from you. And I know that there's little nuggets that I'm going to be able to apply to my life going forward. And then because of the power of technology, other people get to glean some knowledge from it too. And so I just have learned so much and just grateful because everyone has something to teach you. Even the people that you might disagree with on certain things, there's nuggets of truth that you can learn from every person. And so just kind of going back to your idea of being curious, I think this podcast has helped Simone and I be just more curious about life in general.
Yeah, wonderful.
I would definitely agree as well. I feel like we've had a wide range of guests from like finance people to counselors to just our friends, our grandma's friends, like all these different stories that a lot of podcasts you listen to because you're like, oh, I know these people, they're famous, and they have other famous people on the podcast. But something that has been kind of nice about this one is an ordinary person that you have no idea has this incredible story of how God has worked. And we just get to kind of unpack that in the conversation. And like Josie said, even if no one listens to it, like the fact that Josie and I can even learn from people too has been a huge blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I would say that it has helped me just throughout my whole day, like walking by random people in the grocery store. It's made me think, I wonder what their story is.
Yeah.
Because every person has so much to uncover. And I wish that we could just talk with you for hours and just hear even more about your story. But unfortunately we can't. So I would love to ask you our question of the podcast, which is, what is one piece of truth that you would encourage all listeners to be rooted in?
Yeah, I'll share one of the things that this is a truth that's from Scripture, but it's spoken by Tim Keller, who was a really important pastoral father to me, even from afar. So when he passed away, I didn't know how hard that would be, how much grief I could have for this public persona, this big figure. But when he did, it was one of the only deaths I've experienced in life where I had to sit down because I was so shook. One of the things that he has said that I love is he talks about how we show up. And he says, if people love you, to be loved but not known, we know is false. That is, if people love us, but they don't really know us because we're putting up a mask, we know inherently that's false, and yet it's what so many of us do in life. So to be loved but not known is false. To be unloved because people know us, to be unloved and known, that's our deepest fear, is that people would actually know who we are, find out who we are to our depths, to our core, and reject us. That is our deepest fear. But to be known fully and loved fully, that is the gospel. And that's the invitation that I give to people in counseling is, can you know yourself fully? And can you be known by God fully? And can you have an experience that helps you believe He does know all of you and He actually loves all of you?
Yeah.
That is the mission that I'm on, to try to convince others. Because I think we do wear a lot of masks, maybe in the church even more so. But He delights in you, and says, the scriptures say He sings over you. and that, it's while we were still sinners that Christ died for us. Somehow that is so hard for humans to believe, that in the midst of your worst, he looks at you and then he loves you. It's not because of something. That, to me, is a gospel principle that is so hard to believe, even for me sometimes, but when you catch glimpses of it, it is transforming. So I would tell people, if you were in my counseling office and you were sharing the thing you've never shared, or you let God and others see you fully, he still has an experience where he loves you fully, even in light, even despite that thing or that place in your life that you have shame. And so I think that's probably what I would say.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Josh. We really appreciate all of your wisdom that you've shared with us, and I know I've learned so much, and I'm sure Josie has too, so we're excited for our audience to hear this. So thank you so much for spending your time with us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, so great to
be. Thank you so much.